I've heard this phrase thrown around throughout my entire church life. The next generation, now that is the future of the church. But what if that statement is actually part of the problem? Because if they're always the future of the church, then when do they actually matter? Here's the reality. We are not just at risk of losing the next generation. In many ways, we already are losing that next generation. And the scary part about that is that a lot of churches, they don't even realize that it's happening yet. Hey, I'm Josh, and this is Beyond the Numbers. And this podcast is for leaders who care about building healthy people, not just growing bigger ministries. If this conversation challenges you, or any of them really, if they help you think, or maybe in a way they make you feel uncomfortable, but not in a bad way, in a good way, then take a second and subscribe. Share this episode or any of our other episodes with another leader that you feel like, hey, I think you need to hear this. Tell me if you've heard this conversation before. Someone in your congregation or maybe a leader says, we need to grow. We want more families, more young people in our church. Why aren't younger people coming out? It gets said like it's a simple, quick fix. Or maybe if we just tweak a program or add an event, then everything in our church will change with these issues. But what if the question that we're asking is wrong? What if the issue isn't just in them not coming? What if it's with how we're reaching and how we're engaging and how we're connecting with them? Because if we don't understand the gap that we're seeing, we'll keep building things that don't actually reach them. I think one of the biggest issues that we face as a church is that we've unintentionally built our churches around the idea of comfort instead of connection. We prioritize our preferences, our routines, our traditions, and then we sit there and in the midst of it, wonder why the younger generation doesn't feel at home within our churches. You hear phrases like, whoa, that's my seat there. Or, hey, I've sat there and been in this spot for the last 20 years. It's just familiar. Do you just mind moving over just a little bit? Now, it's something that we might laugh about or joke about, but I think it represents something deeper, something maybe a little bit darker. We've created environments within our church that say, this is ours. And honestly, you're lucky to step into it. Instead of creating cultures and communities that say, this is yours too. It's even seen in the way that we talk to people sometimes. I mean, do you remember as a kid complaining about something with school or with life and then having a parent or a grandparent say, oh, you think that's hard? Back in my day, I used to have to walk 2 miles to school in snow, uphill, along the way, both ways. Again, it's a funny thing, but the problem is that stories are powerful. And what comparison does is a lot of times it just shuts people down. And this is echoed sometimes within our churches. We listen to what they're going through. And yes, we might have experienced worse, but instead of hearing their stories, sympathizing with them, we compare and then we minimize. And though our stories may be different and they might not have had the experiences that we have, when you have newer people or younger people or those gaps there and we minimize their struggles, then to them, we lose the right to speak into their life. If you'll indulge me for a second, imagine a student walks into your church for the first time. He quietly slips into the back row and just sits there. Not participating, not standing for worship, just quietly sitting there. And he's wearing a baseball hat. I know, in the sanctuary. On top of that, he's wearing a hoodie too. Definitely not dressed for the service that he's at. For some of us, the first thought that hits our brain, or maybe within our congregation, is, well, he shouldn't be wearing a hat in the sanctuary. I mean, that's disrespectful to the house of God. But what if that student that just came in from a home that's literally falling apart? What if this was the first building that he came across that he actually felt a little bit of peace in? And for a moment, he sat there saying, I can just quiet the noise and sit here with God, quietly with my eyes shut without the pressure of the world. And what if that hat that he's wearing is more like a shield? Because more than anything, he's terrified of being seen and judged by others. That student walks in carrying all those burdens that we're not aware of. But instead of addressing his heart, we address his actions and his appearance. We can't reach people that we're more focused on fixing than loving. Now, everything I'm talking about here, this isn't about throwing it all out the window. It's not about changing the church to fit the culture. It's about removing barriers that we put in place that keep people from Jesus. I mean, if you look at Jesus throughout the Gospels and how he engaged with people, he didn't wait for the people to come out to him. He didn't wait for them to show up in perfect form. Instead, what Jesus did that's a bit different than our model is he went to them. On top of that, he met them where they are, in the messes that they were in. He did it without conditions. If you think about it, he welcomed the children in the midst of the disciples and others trying to push them away. He went and spoke to women in a culture that they were told to stay silent. They were seen as less than. And yet he engaged with them. On top of that, he engaged with people that everyone else would ignore, the outcasts of society. He did all that. And in the midst of it, if you look at Jesus, he didn't build barriers. If anything, he removed them. So how do we follow Jesus' example and actually start closing this generational gap that we see within our churches? The first thing is this. Very simple, back to my first statement. Stop calling them the future of the church. They're not the future. They're part of the church now. So that means don't plan for them, include them, empower them. And a little bit harder, but actually listen to them. The second thing is to create belonging before expectations. Everyone wants to feel like they matter. So when people come into our churches and our surrounding areas, before we correct the behavior, can I tell you what makes a bigger difference in their life? Is that you actually step out and build a relationship with them. As a pastor, I am more willing to listen to a person that has built a relationship with me saying, hey, Josh, you're kind of wrong in this area. Hey, why don't we revisit this? Hey, why don't we work in this? Why? Because they've taken the time to get to know me. They know me. They know my heart. If I had someone off the street come up and start saying that stuff, I'm going to be a bit more hesitant. Relationships matter. And before we focus on fixing people, let's start meeting the people and getting to know them and building that reputation and that relationship with them before we start trying to fix them. Do you care enough to build a relationship with them? The third thing, engage them where they are. Honestly, as a lot of churches, we expect non-Christians, unsaved people, unchurched people to come to us. We build big programs to bring them in, but what if we went to them? A fancy word is called third places. That's the schools, the coffee shops, the gyms, the online spaces. The fact of the matter is that the church is so busy trying to bring people in. And yet if we look at Jesus, a lot of times he went to them. Jesus went to the well. He went to the tax collector's booth. He went to where people lived. As churches, are we going to where they are? We pass people all the time in shopping centers, in lines for fast food, grabbing coffee. We have those moments to engage with them and start building relationships with them. But a lot of times we're so closed off that it's not until we get into our church walls, we sit there and wonder, why aren't they coming out? When Jesus is like, I just gave you 15 opportunities. Start going to where they are and engage with them. And point number 4 goes along with those things. Because when we engage with them, a lot of times we're doing it from the mindset of, I want to get them into the church. I want to raise the numbers. We want younger families. Try building non-transactional relationships. Not come into the church so that we can hit our goals because we want younger families. But instead, saying, I'm doing this, I'm reaching out, I'm going to those third places, I'm engaging with you because I care about you. Because I care about whether or not you come to our church or not, you need to know who Jesus is. You need to know his love for you. Because just like he cares for you, I care for you. Imagine that same student stepping into your service again, sitting back there quietly, hat on. What if you had someone that instead of correcting them, they walked up and said, hey, I'm Josh. What's your name? And then the next week when you see them again, you remember their name. And when you see them in public, you remember their name. And when you're in there at that church service, you ask to sit next to them so they're not alone. And when they speak, you listen to them. See, that's where real change starts. Because at the end of this day, this generation, they're not asking for perfection. More than anything, this generation, they're asking, do I matter here? This generation gap, it's not about age. It's about empathy. It's about whether we're willing to meet people where they are. Instead of sitting there and expecting them always to come to us first, stepping out and saying, I care about you enough to remember your name, to engage with you, and to go where you are to meet with you because that's what Jesus did. This generation, they're not looking for a perfect church. They're looking for a place where they can take off their mask and keep the hat on until they feel safe enough to really be known. So let's be that church. If this conversation challenged you or made you realize that there are some invisible walls within your own building, within your own ministry, I want to hear about it. See, the goal of this podcast isn't to sit here and give you a perfect strategy. More than anything, the goal of this podcast is to build a community of leaders who beyond anything care more about the person than the production. So if you would, do me a favor. Drop a comment below, leave a like, make some statement on one barrier that you are choosing to be committed to removing throughout the coming weeks. But before you go, I want to give you a heads up about where we're going with this next episode, because if you look at this episode on generational gaps, it's really a two-parter. If this episode was about who we're reaching, the next one is about how we're trying to reach them. We're going to be talking about why $10,000 light shows and the striving for perfect transitions are actually failing to connect with a generation that has the world's best fake detector. So make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you ring that little bell and follow us, because next week we're jumping into part 2 where we talk about the death of the stage. Until then, I'm Josh, and thank you for going beyond the numbers with me. I'll see you next week and in the comments.